Hey everybody, today I'm going to be answering a question from a viewer. Before I start, I just want to let you all know if my voice sounds a little weird, it's because I'm still sick from last week, but I'm a lot better than I was, so it should be fine. But anyway, here is the question. It's from Twitter, it's from Ian Smart, and he asks, how has music influenced your outlook on the world, and what's some music that's made you genuinely cry? So this is not a movie question. But I mean, yeah, of course, music has influenced me. It's influenced me tremendously in my life. But I mean, I think the same can be said for most people. I can't think of anybody who is not touched by music in some form, even if they're completely tone deaf. But I will say, for me, it's probably more so than your average person. I know I've said this in many of my videos in the past, but I mean, it is really part of my blood. I come from a very artistic family. Both of my parents are classically trained musicians, both piano teachers, and they taught me throughout my youth. They have in their house two studios, or I guess an office and an actual music studio, and that's where they would do all of their teaching. So if one person had one studio occupied, then the other one would be us practicing or someone else learning. Anyway, so I just grew up listening to music in the house all the time. It was always scales or whatever, students coming in and out. Yeah, so I'm naturally very musical myself. I started playing piano, I think, when I was about 5 years old because my parents, wanted me to at first, and I played viola very seriously for a long time. I love to sing. I mean, I'm not trained in that or anything, but I love it. I do it every day. It is kind of a great release. Yeah, music just kind of flows through me. It's a language I'm very comfortable with. It's meant so much to me in my life, and I think a lot of times I'm able to communicate through music more than anything else. There are times when I don't know how to say something or express myself in another medium, so I'll do it through music. And honestly, music is my favorite artistic medium. It's my favorite form of expression, even more so than film, for sure, actually. And a lot of people might be surprised by that, but it's true. There's something that is really intrinsic about music. There's something that is just very intuitive, and it allows you to kind of be able to create your own images while you're listening to the music. You can create your own stories and your own feelings from whatever is coming from the song that speaks to you, or the piece of music, through the cadence of the melody and lyrically, whatever. I mean, you can just turn the lights off. One thing that I always love to do is just turn the lights off and put my headphones in, and then you can just create this whole another world for yourself. Or perhaps it sort of enhances the feelings and the things that are going on in your real life, in the real world, more so when you're listening to the music. And lyrically also, that's very key to a song for sure, or whatever. I mean, I love to write poetry. That's always something that I've been really into in my adult life. And with lyrics and poetry, I'll just say poetry in general, it's so powerful, I think, because it is so open to interpretation, and in a way that a narrative, like a normal story or something that you'd see in a film isn't. It's very abstract, and in a way you can sort of fill in the blanks for yourself. An artist can be writing about a breakup or something like that, but you don't know who they're talking about a lot of the time. A lot of that is very ambiguous. And so really what you do is you can only speculate. And then what you do is you just kind of, it becomes like you're living vicariously through the words, through what the artist is saying. And so you're able to kind of project your own life onto it. I mean, you can do the same thing with film, but there's just something, as I said, more ambiguous about it, more open to interpretation when you're doing it with music. But of course, to get back to the question, it really has influenced my outlook, because there's barely a moment that goes by where music is not playing in my head. And even, like film scores, when I talk about how it's influenced me in terms of the way I watch films, for sure, and the way that I analyze a film. Because with a film, there's always music going on in the background, whether it's diegetic or non-diegetic. But with me, I mean, film scores were such a big part of my life, my childhood. I grew up with classical music as my big influence, naturally, because I lived with classical musicians. So I know a lot about classical music, mainly more kind of like romantic era, and more of the contemporary, like 20th century stuff, which is my personal favorite. But honestly, though, I think in terms of what I'm most knowledgeable about is film scores. I have this is an encyclopedia of knowledge when it comes to all kinds of classic film scores. And I scare a lot of people with the amount of knowledge that is up here from all of that. that's all I would do as a kid, just listen to tons of them. I owned dozens and dozens and dozens of soundtracks. But the older I get, the more I listen to more modern music. My parents obviously gave me a great foundation and great tools for my just my musical education, I guess you could say. But outside of that, outside of classical music, I had nothing. But yeah, one thing that is weird though is obviously my parents have exquisite taste in classical music, but modern music not so much. It like that has been a struggle, and that always kind of made me sad because there's a lot that I feel like I wish that they could experience. And for me, being able to be exposed to more modern music, 20th century and beyond, I think that that's when I really started to figure out what kind of person I am. It's like as I was figuring myself out, as I was transitioning from adolescence to adulthood, is really when I started to find kind of musically that transition as well. So for instance, like college years, right? That's the time for experimentation. And for me, definitely like that was a big thing for me. And so I was starting to try all these new things and stepping outside my comfort zone and doing things that I never dreamed I would do in a million years when I was a kid. And I think that starting to become more of a free-spirited person, definitely the music reflected that in the sense that I was listening to a lot of like 1960s music. And this is all stuff that most people knew, but you got to remember from my background, I wasn't exposed to too much of that. So I was just now learning about Bob Dylan and the Beatles and, you know, the Doors, Rolling Stones, things like that. I was really obsessed with psychedelic music from the 1960s, protest music too. I guess they sort of go hand in hand at times. But yeah, like as I said, the Doors, Jimi Hendrix, 13th Floor Elevators, music like that, because it was reflecting that rebellion and that liberation that I was looking for within. And I was, you know, shunning the shackles, so to speak. Now I mix it up. I like more of the experimental artists, the ones that do not get the recognition that they deserve, both in film and music. I would say my musical taste definitely, there's definitely a similarity between that and my film tastes, because from the outset, if you're just an average person, you know, turning on the radio or going to see a movie at an average movie theater, it's all very boring, right? It's all just the same shit over and over and over again. And there's nothing really to grasp. There's nothing to really contemplate in it. And for me, I'm like, no, there's a lot of great stuff. People always say the best years of music or the best years of film were behind us. And I totally disagree with that. I think there are amazing artists, you know, directors and musicians out there doing such innovative, creative work that is totally pushing the boundaries. It's just they're not, again, that's not what the public wants. And so they're kind of shoved to the sidelines, but they're there. You just have to really look for it. As far as the second part of your question goes, you asked what music has made me genuinely cry. And of course, tons of pieces of music have made me cry through the years. And if I name them all, I couldn't name them all, but if I could, we would be here all day and beyond that. So I'm just going to name a few key ones. And these do, you know, some of the moments in terms of how I've gotten emotional do involve psychedelics, so just warning you in advance there. But I'll start with a piece by Hector Berlioz. So this is a Romantic era piece of music, and it's called The Requiem. And for those of you who don't know it, you may have heard it actually if you've seen Tree of Life. It plays in the end of the film. You hear the Agnus Dei at the very end of the film, as well as another portion as well. It is one of the most transcendent pieces of music I've ever heard in my life. It does feel like when you're listening to it, it's like you're letting go of life. It's like that transition between life and death. And I like to listen to pieces of music like that when I really need to reflect on something. So with this piece of music, I have shed quite a bit of tears to it because if I'm experiencing like deep loss or deep pain or even great love, also, I've listened to this piece and I've gotten pretty emotional to it. I remember actually, it's kind of ironic because you think of this piece as reflecting, you know, death and things like that. But believe it or not, in my happiest moments, I've listened to it as well. There's a euphoric quality to it. The first time I was ever in love, I listened to this piece, which I know may sound kind of strange, but there's something about it that makes you feel on a very spiritual level as you do when you're in love. And you feel the same thing when, you know, if you're experiencing loss. So yeah, and Agnus Dei that I mentioned, that's in Tree of Life at the end, that's the piece that I want at my funeral. So And I'm not a big funeral person. I don't want the coffin and all of that stuff. That's kind of a waste of money to me. But yeah, if there's a gathering of any sort when I die, I want this piece to be played because it's the kind of piece that can bring people together, as I said, in a very spiritual way and in a very moving way. Next, I'm going to go with The Rite of Spring by Igor Stravinsky. And people may think that's kind of weird because it's like, really? That's a piece that you cry in? But yeah, it is actually. But it makes more sense when I put it in context. But I will say, just first of all, this is one of my favorite pieces of music ever. Definitely one of my favorite pieces, contemporary pieces from the 20th century. And ever since I saw Fantasia as a child, this is a piece that has always really stuck with me as something very special. I think it's, obviously it's very experimental. Nothing like this had ever been done before when it first was composed and when it came out. It's really gritty and it's unexpected. It's unrelenting and it's raw. It's just rawness. I love rawness in music and in anything, honestly. And to me, it's like the original rock and roll. I feel like it's like it's got something about it that is just unhinged, and you sweat while you're listening to it. The musicians, you feel like, are sweating. You feel like you're really working to listen to it. And if you try listening to something like this on acid or something, it's torture. It really is. And I've done that a few times, and a few people think I'm crazy, but I've done it because I like the idea of it pushing me into really, really scary, dark places that force me to face my fears. It is a very primal piece of music. It's animalistic. It's very percussive. And I love all of that. And my favorite part of the piece is the spring rounds, just because, okay, that's a slower section, and that's the part that it's not as referenced as I think it should be. But I like it because it might be one of the most erotic pieces of music I have ever heard. It runs so deep. It has a dangerous, destructive quality to it. You feel right on the edge when you're listening to it, and you feel the emotion as though it's gonna just explode in a way. Hence eroticism. But I listened to that once on mushrooms, and I had all the lights off and I was in a dark room. And just the whole piece, what an intense experience that was, because it's like I saw everything. I saw like the dawn of man, and I saw war, and I saw love, I saw chaos, I saw beauty, and and that moved me to tears, but in a way that was very physical. It wasn't so much touching, but as in I was kind of experiencing a lot physically, and it was as I said, a raw experience. So, but yeah, when people say things like, oh, I find classical music boring, I go to sleep, they haven't listened to the right kind of music, because I'm telling you, I mean, if you listen to this piece and you think it's boring, then you're beyond help. Next, I'm going to do some more modern music. So I'm going to go with, of course, I have to throw in Radiohead because Radiohead has been such a big part of my life, especially emotionally as an adult. And I'm going to go specifically, though, with the song called Nude from their album In Rainbows, which is my favorite Radiohead album. And of course, I can name tons of different songs by Radiohead that are very powerful. How to Disappear Completely, Karma Police. There's so many pieces that of course, many depressed souls out there listen to and cry to incessantly. But Nude for me is maybe one of the best songs they ever wrote. It's, to me, one of their most pure songs, and it has such a luminous quality to it. It glows and it feels very tender, yet it's juxtaposed with that loneliness, that haunting loneliness that they are known for. And I always say this, I've said this before in other videos, but I'll just repeat it because I really do believe it. Radiohead has captured this generation in a way that has touched so many people. And I think that it captures the millennial generation in a way that's extremely potent, because it's about, the pain of not being able to connect with other humans. There's that feeling of aimlessness, that we are kind of all enveloped in our own digital cocoons that we feel like we can't escape from, and we can't feel things in the way that we used to because of the world that we live in. And that's the powerful thing about them is wanting to pierce through that so badly, yet there's always that bitterness and that feeling of being removed, and they capture that in the textures, instrumentally and all that so beautifully on such a sophisticated level. But this song, I mean, it is pure perfection. And if you haven't listened to it in a while, listen to it again, because it does have that bittersweet quality with all those little digital touches in there. But yet there's that haunting voice, that I always say Tom York has this very strange voice that, some people love, some people hate, but there's a childlike quality to it. It's, as I said, it's haunting, but yet if you hear him live, I have seen them live, there's something about his voice, as quiet as it seems, it just pierces through a crowd and makes everyone go silent. He's very charismatic. And with this song, at the very end of the song, or I say towards the end of the song, there's that moment where he just hits that note and it's just him singing, and oh my God, that just gets me every time. I mean, I cry like a bitch. But like the Requiem that I mentioned before, this is a piece, or this is a song that I can listen to along with lots of different Radiohead songs, but I can listen to them in very sad moments, and I have, and also really happy moments, because there's that versatility in them. And especially in Rainbows, I think, as I said, there's a luminous quality to it, a tenderness, a feeling of hope while listening to it, while also having that sadness as well. And so it captures the best of both worlds, and that's why it's great. Next, I'm going with Sick by Chelsea Wolfe. When I am sad, when I'm very depressed, I play a lot of Chelsea Wolfe. She is extremely dark, her music, just the very depths, just absolute bottom, pitch black is what I think of with her. Just the very depths of sadness, of just pain, and it's gothic. And yet there's a haunting, sort of enchanting quality to it. There's a beauty in all of that. And I think this song in particular reflects beauty within the chaos. And the name of the album, I think, is, Pain is Beauty. What I like about this song is that it's kind of unexpected. And it sounds very chaotic at the beginning, as though you're being swallowed by all this grief and pain and destruction. That's what it feels like. Like it's too much and you're starting to kind of overflow. And then the second half of the song does something very different. It's much less chaotic. It kind of clears. It's like the smoke clears, and then there's this kind of driving quality to the music where it's as if to say that now there's a clarity and there's a peace within, and we're moving forward. But through moving forward, there's just such pain associated with that. You may have found your footing and you're walking forward, but all of that really hurts, and it's lonely, and you still feel helpless even though you are carrying on. But I've heard this song a lot. I mean, it's hard for me to listen to this day, just because it brings back some very scary moments for me, traumatic moments for me, because a lot of shit has gone down with this playing in the background in my life. But yeah, so this is, I had to include this one on a list of songs that's made me cry, because I've cried to it a lot. And then last, I'm just going to go with The End by The Doors. I was an obsessive Doors fan for a long time, and I still love them. But I think The End is one of the great songs ever written. I really do. It's one of my all-time favorites, like top 5. And it's one of the most transcendent rock songs. It does, in a weird way, remind me of the Requiem by Berlioz that I mentioned before. Just because it does feel like, in a very different way, but it feels as though you're dying and you're transitioning between the physical world and the afterlife. And this one I love because it's very experimental. It is very meditative. It's very psychedelic. And it's the perfect way to close an album. I can't think of a better way you could close an album, especially at that time. But it does. It's a long piece of music, and it has a very metaphysical quality to it. It's as if all of the feelings that you've ever felt in your life are merging together, whether it's love or pain or sexuality or violence, and it's all merging, and you're kind of experiencing how all of this ties into your existence. And I wish that I could just, go back in a time machine and go back to a time where, Jim Morrison is performing it. The Doors are performing it at some club in the 60s, and, everyone's on acid, and some people are having sex in the corner, and people are dancing or whatever. I would love to experience that, because it is a very spiritual piece of music and it does bring people together in a very deep sort of way. I don't listen to this song very often. I reserve it again for moments of reflection and contemplation. At times it's perfect to listen to when you're watching a sun go down or something like that. It's also a very intense piece of music, but it's a journey. And I think not all of them, but a lot of the pieces of music I've mentioned have a quality of having like a journey sort of thing. So yeah, those are songs that are, or pieces of music, I should say, that have made me cry. That's how music has influenced me. I know this isn't movie related, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. And let me know if go ahead and in the comments, you go ahead and mention pieces of music that have touched you in that way as well. And yeah, so thank you for listening. If you want to check out any social media information, it's below. You can watch more videos here and you can subscribe, but only if you want to. Catch you next time.